The system notified that the skeleton had slain the black tiger and received a level increase. Hyrcanus paused in surprise, wondering if it had really taken him 3 full days just to reach level 10. It was far longer than he had expected. His servant seemed visibly upset, but after a short delay the system finally congratulated the master as well. Hyrcanus had officially reached level 10. The system reported several changes at once. Monsters would no longer spawn in the training dungeon, the newbie mark had been removed, and the accumulated rewards were ready for distribution. Hyrcanus instinctively glanced at his wristwatch, the multifunctional device responsible for stats, missions, maps, inventory, and messages. He realized he had barely used it lately and immediately opened the character window. Looking over his attributes, he frowned. The numbers were unimpressive. The system prompted him to distribute his free points. Hyrcanus hesitated. This was his very first allocation. There would be no second chance to correct a mistake. For a necromancer, increasing intellect or magic would have been the obvious choice. Yet, contrary to all logic, he placed every single point into strength. In an instant, the strength stat surged by 50 points, jumping to a total of 53. The skeleton, silently observing, slumped in visible disappointment. Noticing this, Hyrcanus asked what was wrong. He calmly explained that he had no intention of abandoning necromancy. This decision was made entirely for the sake of training his conscript. Increasing intellect or magic would not bring immediate, tangible results. Strength, however, would allow him to personally teach the skeleton every combat technique he had refined in his past life. He openly admitted that he was staking his life on the skeleton's growth, trusting it to absorb everything he taught. He ordered his servant not to hold back and to focus entirely on training while he handled everything else. Hyrcanus also mentioned that there were ways to compensate for missing attributes. The very next day, he headed to the Raiders Association branch located within Phygus Castle. There, the task distributor raised an item and loudly announced the arrival of new missions. Instantly, a crowd of players surged forward. Hyrcanus observed that even during this slow season, people still rushed toward quests. When it was finally his turn at the counter, he requested to see the remaining missions. The elderly clerk agreed but warned him that only overly difficult tasks or low-reward assignments were left. As Hyrcanus skimmed the list, most of the missions struck him as painfully dull. Then one entry caught his eye. The moment he selected it, he knew it would be his trump card. The mission required exploring a cave on Mount Bima. It was a standard assignment filled with low-level monsters and offered a meager reward of 10 gold coins. The old man frowned and asked if he was certain about his choice. Hyrcanus replied calmly, fully aware that the mission itself was unremarkable. What mattered was the condition attached to it. If completed upon reaching level 15, the player would earn the title Promising. Many dismissed titles as meaningless, but Hyrcanus knew better. Titles directly enhanced a character's stats. A low-level player with average attributes could experience a dramatic boost simply by acquiring one. This quest marked the true beginning of his career. Leaving the guild, Hyrcanus decided it was time to prepare. Sometime later, he arrived at Mount Bima, only to grimace in frustration. His appearance was absurd. He silently cursed himself, wondering how he had managed to look so ridiculous. The reason was simple. He had spent nearly all his money equipping the skeleton, leaving himself with only cheap, laughable clothing. Still, he decided it would suffice. He would finish the mission quickly and buy proper gear afterward. Without wasting another second, Hyrcanus plunged into the forest. Elsewhere among the trees, a blood-soaked hand suddenly emerged from a bush. A wounded man cried out for help before being violently dragged back inside. 3 players laughed quietly as they listened to his screams fade away. Not long after, a warrior arrived at Mount Bima and loudly declared that the great adventure of Mighty Multi was about to begin. Having reached level 11, he was confident that he might soon become a top player. Suddenly, he heard a desperate plea for help. Someone was begging for assistance in rescuing a missing companion. He rushed toward the sound. A priest explained that their party had been ambushed by a monster that appeared without warning. They had barely survived and were now completely out of healing potions. The warrior checked his device and said he might have a few to spare. The priest burst into grateful tears. It was a lie. While the warrior was distracted, another man struck him from behind. Weakening rapidly from blood loss, the warrior collapsed, utterly confused. The priest leaned over him, thanked him once more, and coldly stated that his belongings would now be put to good use. Realizing he had been deceived by such despicable people, the warrior burned with rage. The priest drove a blade into his body and calmly remarked that it was his own fault for falling for such an obvious trick. The system announced that player multi had been eliminated and removed from the game. His watch was reset and transferred to his killers. They were members of the Ralph family, a notorious gang of gambler assassins. After waiting several hours, the priest cast a chilling look at his companions and ordered them to search for the next victim. Meanwhile, in another part of the forest, the skeleton prepared to engage a pack of wolves. The monsters lunged without hesitation. Hyrcanus snapped his fingers, switching his servant into attack mode. The skeleton surged forward and effortlessly tore through the pack. The system announced that the skeleton warrior had slain an ancient wolf and gained 375 experience points, followed by 366 and 379 from the remaining beasts. Watching the battle, Hyrcanus noted that equipping the skeleton with a sword had transformed it into a force capable of wiping out entire packs alone. He felt reassured. Prioritizing his subordinates' equipment had been the right decision. Real players valued performance over appearance. The skeleton glanced back, catching its master's proud look, but Hyrcanus waved it off. He stated that if the wolves were finished, it was time to move on. He needed to level up and get rid of this ridiculous outfit. The skeleton immediately followed. Suddenly, an arrow whistled through the air and pierced straight through the skeleton's skull. Hyrcanus froze, instinctively searching for the source. A man rushed forward, apologizing profusely. It was the same group of deceivers. The priest claimed he had mistaken the skeleton for a monster and begged forgiveness. Hyrcanus was about to let it go, until he noticed the blood-stained watch on the priest's wrist and the sword belonging to the slain warrior. Instantly, he understood who they were. Concealing his realization, he pretended to believe them. Smiling, he said it was fine and asked whether they had a mana potion. The priest replied that they did not, but offered to help him level up instead, explaining that mana would be restored upon leveling. Hyrcanus agreed, maintaining his act. Claiming responsibility for the accident, the priest pointed toward nearby monsters and called his group forward. As they moved, he quietly confirmed the plan with his accomplices. The warrior would draw the monster's aggression first, the mage would apply a buff, and then they would accidentally release it onto Hyrcanus, expecting him to panic. Their plan collapsed instantly. The skeleton dispatched the monster with ease. Hyrcanus calmly stated that everything was fine and suggested continuing. Unease crept into the players' minds. They questioned what kind of creature he controlled, and whether his level was far higher than it appeared. Adjusting their strategy, they released multiple waves of monsters at once. While Hyrcanus was supposedly distracted, the warrior circled behind him, confident of victory. He raised his mace and struck. Hyrcanus dodged effortlessly. The counterattack was immediate. The warrior was crushed by a devastating blow. The priest screamed in panic, unable to comprehend what was happening. Hyrcanus snapped his fingers. The skeleton answered instantly, its eye sockets igniting with a cold blue glow. Without hesitation, he charged forward alongside his master, launching a decisive attack on the bandits. They screamed in terror, crying out for him to stop, begging for mercy. But they no longer had even the slightest chance to defend themselves. A perfectly coordinated assault from Hyrcanus and his skeleton crashed down upon them, and one by one, their bodies collapsed to the ground. Approaching the fallen enemies, Hyrcanus made it clear that he knew people like them all too well. He reflected grimly that such types gained trust only to betray it at the right moment and steal everything they could. He admitted that if he still thought the way he once had, he himself might have fallen for such a crude and primitive trick. The priest wailed in despair, pleading for Hyrcanus to wait and offering up everything he had in exchange for his life. But Hyrcanus no longer trusted anyone. Calmly, he made it clear that it was already too late, and without mercy, he finished the enemy off. At that moment, the system announced that the player Ralph had been eliminated. It also reported that the 8 watches he had been carrying had dropped to the ground. When Hyrcanus saw how many watches Ralph possessed, a surge of anger rose within him. This scoundrel was completely insane. Still, the trophies offered tremendous benefits. First and foremost, Hyrcanus decided that he would finally buy himself proper clothes. Turning around, he noticed his skeleton casually kicking the already defeated warrior. Hyrcanus addressed his companion and suggested that they gather the loot scattered nearby. Then he extended his hand and began healing the wound left by the arrow that had pierced the skeleton's skull. In only a short time, the skeleton was fully restored. With a small smile, Hyrcanus remarked that his companion looked genuinely pleased. He added thoughtfully that appearance meant nothing in the game. True beauty was revealed only from within. As he struck an awkward pose while saying this, the skeleton stared at him in silent confusion. Meanwhile, Hyrcanus noted that the watch dropped by the priest was a true jackpot. He knew the odds of obtaining rare items from another player's watch were less than 1%, yet luck had clearly favored him. Among the trophies was also an enormous amount of gold. Lifting a mask from the fallen inventory, he thought that thanks to these fools, everything was progressing far faster than he had expected. He decided that he would soon begin recording his gaming adventures, and for that, he would need a distinct style. But as that thought crossed his mind, something unpleasant suddenly resurfaced in his memory. And that's where our video ends. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like and leave a comment down below. And of course, if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button and the bell icon so you're updated on our next content. Until the next video.